And nothing better symbolizes the beautiful variety of South Africa than
Pickering!
With modern F1 expanding and seemingly aiming to have around 42 races on the calendar, many fans are voicing their opinions on tracks they would like to see either added or re-added to the schedule. And one of the most popular answers, no matter who you ask, is Kyalami in South Africa. This would make a lot of sense, of course, as there's currently a whole inhabited continent missing from the World Championship, but of course it's down to the F1 bosses, and so we're probably going to just end up going to America and the Middle East 20 more times. With that being said, if Kyalami did return to the schedule, then that wouldn't be the first time it had made a comeback. From 1986 to 1991, Formula 1 left South Africa due to its apartheid situation in the country at the time, and Kyalami used that time to redevelop its racetrack. When F1 returned, they found a brand new circuit, not even slightly based on the old one, and today I will be reviewing the race that followed. For the first race of the 1992 season, there were worrying signs for anyone who wasn't called Nigel Mansell, as the Williams driver took pole position by 0.7 of a second. The McLarens of Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger lined up 2nd and 3rd, and the other Williams of Riccardo Patrese lined up 4th. 5th and 6th were Ferrari driver Jean Alesi and future Ferrari driver Michael Schumacher. There were also a bunch of new names on the grid since this was the first race of the season. These included Ukyo Katayama, who qualified 18th and ahead of his teammate Gasho, and Christian Fittipaldi, who qualified just one place behind his own teammate Morbidelli. 3 other debutants failed to qualify, with those being Paul Bermondo, Andrea Chiesa and Giovanna Amati, and the Jordan of Stefano Modena also missed the cut. In fairness though, none of these teams or drivers missed the cut quite as badly as the new Andrea Moda team, who were excluded for not having paid the deposit for new teams. Team principal and all-round nutjob Andrea Sassetti said that it wasn't a new team, and that they were just a continuation of Coloni, a team who had gone under at the end of 1991. It turns out this whole blunder happened because Sassetti had simply bought Coloni's assets but not their entry, so the FIA put their foot down. Andrea Moda would eventually start just a single Grand Prix, when Roberto Moreno heroically qualified 26th at Monaco. Anyway, when the race began, there was seemingly a jump start for Olivier Griard, but surprisingly nothing came of it, while up in front it was Patrese who got the best start and split the McLarens. By the time they reached turn 1, it was a Williams 1-2, partly because of their excellent traction control systems, but Senna swarmed all over the back of Patrese, eager to split the FW14Bs. At the back meanwhile, there was a spin for Martin Brundle and an off for Andrea de Cesaris, although unfortunately I can't tell you how this particular incident started, so I don't know whether to add it to the crunch count or not. What I do know though is that it can't have been good for Brundle's clutch, as the Benetton retired after just 1 lap. At the end of the first lap it was Mansell leading, followed by Patrese, Senna, Alesi and Berger, and look how frustrated Senna was already. Clearly Patrese was happy to play the wingman role right from the start, holding up Senna while Mansell got away. Anyway, we've skipped forward a few laps here, and you can see that Patrese too had put the hammer down and got away from Senna, but there is actually something rather interesting that you can see from this onboard. The early 1990s were a time of rapid technical innovation for F1 cars, and in 91 the Williams team had introduced semi-automatic transmissions, using paddles on the back of their steering wheels. McLaren had quickly followed their lead, adding flappy paddles to their 92 car, but it's worth noting that their car wasn't actually ready yet at the start of the season. What Senna is driving here is his championship-winning 1991 car, and as you can see from this onboard, he is still changing gear with an old-fashioned lever. The MP4/7A would be introduced from round 3. Anyway, I can finally wake up the crunch count as we look at Bertrand Gachot in the pits. He'd been forced to make a suspension change after contact with another driver in the early stages, and as that was confirmed by his team, then it's official. Gachot was driving the Venturi, basically just a rebranded Larousse, which in itself was basically a Lola. Confused? Jolly good. Another renamed team was March, who for the past 2 seasons had competed as Leighton House. Unfortunately, they weren't having much more luck, with Karl Wendlinger retiring early despite a strong qualifying. He was left to march back to the garage. Oh, and so too did former March driver Ivan Capelli, his Ferrari succumbing to an engine failure on lap 29. Meanwhile, his teammate Alesi was still running in 4th place, holding off Schumacher, who had passed Berger's McLaren. Oh Ferrari, some things just never change. That's Alesi out too, and the Scuderia left Kyalami with 0 points. Mamma mia. To be honest, I'm starting to worry that this video will seem a bit like a retirement compilation, since that's basically all I've talked about so far, but the reality is that F1 cars in the early 90s tended to drop like flies, especially at the first race of the year. There's our usual culprit for retirement, Andrea de Cesaris, in the pits with a rather dead Tyrrell. Also out of the race by this point were Gabriele Tarquini's Fonmetal and Christian Fittipaldi's Minardi, ending the Brazilian's Grand Prix debut. As for the race itself, it was proving a bit of a slow burner. Mansell was still extending his lead, Patrese was still holding off Senna for second, and Schumacher was still fourth from Berger. This is why I'm glad that F1 these days is a bit more strategic, with mandatory pit stops and regular strategy battles. Back in the day it was very much a case of just running until your car blew up or you reached the finish line, whichever came first. At this point the race was over halfway done, with pretty much no major developments. Look at how much they have to squish Michael Schumacher's name just to get it to fit in the standings. Why is that so randomly funny to me? Oh my word. Since we just looked at the standings, it's worth noting that while the top 5 had remained very stationary, the question of who would finish 6th was a lot more interesting, and it changed hands several times, basically whenever someone in the midfield retired. Eventually it ended up in the hands of Johnny Herbert, who hadn't scored a point in nearly 3 years. This could well have been a career-saving drive for Johnny. Anyway, it was of course Nigel Mansell who came through to win the Grand Prix, a whole 24 seconds clear of Patrese and securing a Grand Chelem, meaning he took the pole, the fastest lap and the win, and he led every single lap of the race. Riccardo Patrese eventually made it a 1-2 for Williams and their genius active suspension, and reigning champion Senna came home third. Fourth was Schumacher in a career best finish up until that point. Fifth was Berger, and a lap down in 6th was Johnny Herbert's Lotus, a few seconds ahead of Eric Comas in the Ligier. 13 lucky cars finished in total. Guys, before I give this race a score, I want to let you know that I have a Dailymotion account for all the videos that get taken down from my YouTube channel by the pesky FOM bots. Due to the high levels of parody, review and education my videos contain, I believe that all of them fall under fair use, but sadly this isn't always enough. On my Dailymotion, you can find the 1996 Monaco and Portuguese Grand Prix, as well as the 2008 Japanese Grand Prix, and more. I also now have a Twitch channel where I stream about once a week and would really like to grow my audience. The links to both of these accounts are in the description of this video. Thank you. I gave the Grand Prix a 2 out of 10 overall, as for the most part it was an extremely straightforward race and a very underwhelming way to start a season. It was helped by being a season opener, hence having quite high championship implications, but I gave it -2 bonus points for the dominance of the Williams and the long gaps between anything of note happening. I gave the Driver of the Day award for Best Driver to Nigel Mansell for his dominant Grand Chelem, the second of his career. Little did anyone know at the time, but he was actually driving with a broken left foot courtesy of his crash at the Australian Grand Prix the previous year. I'll give the Inouye trophy to Olivier Griard, who jumped the start and then made it hard for the leader to pass him before he retired from the race. Drive safely guys, and I'll see you next time.